Hello everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel. This is Zaman from Bookers and now let's go for chapter 3 of Robinson Crusoe. Chapter 3 part 5 and 6. Part 5. Learning to live alone. I still needed a lot of things. Well, I said I am going to have to make them, so every day I worked. First of all, I wanted to make my cave bigger. I carried out a stone from the cave, and after many days' hard work, I had a large cave in the side of the hill. Then I needed a table and a chair, and that was my next job. I had to work on them for a long time. I also wanted to make places to put all my food and all my tools and guns. But every time I wanted a piece of wood, I had to cut down a tree. It was long, slow, difficult work, and during the next months, I learned to be very clever with my tools. There was no hurry. I had all the time in the world. I also went out every day, and I always had my gun with me. Sometimes I killed a wild animal, and then I had meat to eat. But when it got dark, I had to go to bed because I had no light. I couldn't read or write because I couldn't see for a long time. I didn't know what to do, but in the end, I learned how to use the fat of dead animals to make a light. The weather on my island was usually very hot, and there were often storms and heavy rain. The next June, it rained all the time, and I couldn't go out very often. I was also ill for some weeks, but slowly I got better when I was stronger. I began to go out again. The first time I killed a wild animal, and the second time I caught a big turtle. I was on the island for 10 months before I visit other parts of it. During those months, I worked hard on my cave and my house and my fence. Now I was ready to find out more about the rest of the island. First, I walked along the side of a little river. There I found open ground without trees. Later I came to more trees with many different fruits. I decided to take a lot of the fruit and to put it to dry in the sun for a time. Then I could keep it for many months. That night I went to sleep in a tree for the second time, and the next day I went on with my journey. Soon I came to an opening in the hills. In front of me everything was green and there were flowers everywhere. There were also a lot of different birds and animals. I saw that my house was on the worst side of the island, but I didn't want to move from there. It was my home now. I stayed away for 3 days and then I came home, but I often went back to the other greener side of the island. And so my life went on. Every month I learned to do or make something new, but I had troubles and accidents too. Once there was a terrible storm with very heavy rain. The roof of my cave fell in and nearly killed me. I had to build it up again with many pieces of wood. I had a lot of food now. I cooked it over a fire or dried it in the sun. So I always had meat during the rainy months when I couldn't go out with a gun. I learned to make pots to keep my food in. But I wanted very much to make a harder, stronger pot. A pot that would not break in a fire. I tried many times but I couldn't do it. Then one day I was lucky. I made some new pots and put them in a very hot fire. They changed color but didn't break. I left them there for many hours, and when they were cold again, I found that they were hard and strong. That night I was very happy. I had hot water for the first time in the island. By then I also had my own bread that was locked. One day I found a little bag. We used it on the ship to keep the chickens food in there. Was still some of the food in the bag that I dropped some of it onto the ground. A month later I saw something bright green there, and after 6 months I had a very small field of corn. I was very excited. Perhaps now I could make my own bread. It was easy to say, but not easy to do. It's a lot of work to do. Make bread from corn. Many people eat bread, but how many people can take corn from a field and make a bread out of it without help? I had to learn and to make many new things, and it was a year before I cooked and ate my first bread. During all this time, I never stopped thinking about escape. When I traveled across to the other side of the island, I could see the other islands, and I said to myself, perhaps I can get there with a boat. Perhaps I can get back to England one day. So I decided to make myself a boat. I cut down a big tree and then began to make a long hole in it. It was hard work, but about 6 months later, I had a very fine canoe next. I had to get it down to the sea. How stupid I was. Why didn't I think before I began work? Of course. The canoe was too heavy. I couldn't move it. I pulled and pushed and tried everything, but it didn't move. I was very unhappy for a long time after that. That happened in my 4th year on the island. In my 6th year, I did make myself a smaller canoe, but I didn't try to escape in it. The boat was too small for a long journey, and I didn't want to die at sea. The island was my home now, not my prison, and I was just happy to be alive. A year or two later, I made myself a second canoe on the other side of the island. I also built myself a second house there, and so I had two homes. My life was still busy from morning to night. There were always things to do or to make. I learned to make new clothes for myself from the skins of dead animals. They looked very strange, it's true, but they kept me dry in the rain. I kept wooden tools at both my house and also wild goats. There were many goats on the island and make filled with high fences to keep them in. They learned to take food from me, and soon I had goat's milk to drink every day. I also worked hard in my cornfields, and so many years went by. Part 6. A footprint. Then one year, something strange and terrible happened. I often walked along the shore, and one day I saw something in the sand. I went over to look at it more carefully and stopped in sudden surprise. It was the footprint of a man. Who could this be? Afraid, I looked around me. I listened. I waited nothing. I was more and more afraid. Perhaps this man was one of those white people who killed and ate other men. I looked everywhere, but there was nobody and no other footprint. I turned and hurried home. There isn't someone on my island. I said to myself, perhaps he knows about me. Perhaps he is watching me now from behind the tree. Perhaps he wants to kill me. That night I couldn't sleep. The next day I got all my guns ready and I put more wood and young trees around my house. Nobody could see me now, but after 15 years alone on the island, I was afraid and I didn't leave my cave for 3 days. In the end, I had to go out to milk my goats, but for 2 years I was afraid. I stayed near my home and I never used my guns because I didn't want to make a noise. I couldn't forget the footprint, but I saw and heard nothing more, and slowly I began to feel happier. One day, a year later, I was over on the west side of the island. From there, I could see the other islands, and I could also see a boat for out to sea. If you have a boat, I thought it's easy to sail across to this island. Perhaps that explains the footprint. It was a visitor from one of the other islands. I began to move more freely around the island again and built myself a third house. It was a very secret place in a cave. No white man will ever find it, I said to myself. Then one year something happened which I can never forget. I was again on the west side of the island and I was walking along the shore. Suddenly I saw something which made me feel ill. There were heads, arms, feet, and other pieces of men's bodies everywhere. For a minute I couldn't think, and then I understood. Sometimes there were fights between the white men and the other islands. Then they came here to my island with their prisoners to kill them, cook them, and eat them. Slowly I went home, but I was very angry. How could men do this? For many months I watched carefully for the smoke from fires. But I didn't see anything. Somehow the wild men came and went, and I never saw them. I was angry and afraid. I wanted to shoot them all, but there were many of them and only one of me. Perhaps I can shoot two or three, I said to myself, but then they will kill and eat me. Then one morning in my 23rd year on the island, I was out in my fields and I saw the smoke from a fire. Quickly I went up the hill to watch. There were 9 men around the fire and they were cooking their terrible food. Then this white man danced around the fire, singing and shouting. This went on for about 2 hours, and then they got into their boats and sailed away. I went down to the shore and saw the blood of the dead man on the sand. The next time they came, I am going to kill them, I said angrily. And that was the end of Robinson Crusoe Part 3. Thank you for listening me and don't forget to like and subscribe my YouTube channel. Goodbye until tomorrow.